Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everybody here. Everybody's so excited about the budget. Welcome, Mr. Williams. Wow, so here we are again. So I get to do this at this time of year, and we get to talk about the financial status of the city and what the future looks like. It's an awesome responsibility to get up here before you and to talk about the operation of the city, because I think you've heard me say before, a budget is a point in time. And it is a product of decisions that have been made by this council, prior councils, but it's also about the future, whether we're spending resources in the right way so that future generations can benefit for our time here. So to me, it's a point in time, and it's a conversation that doesn't start today and it doesn't end today. And what I'll add to that is today I get to give you a high-level summarization of how we spend $2.3 billion for our ratepayers, our citizens, our taxpayers, and I'll do that at a high level. We have work sessions scheduled so we can dive deeper into different topics as you so choose. We're prepared to go into all those different things, and I'll talk about some of those items that we will schedule along the way too. But I actually really enjoy doing the budget. I mean, that sounds a little odd, but I really do enjoy that process of people thinking about today and thinking about the future and asking ourselves, are we making the biggest impact that we can with the money that we currently spend? And how do we know that? And how do we measure that? And how do we convince our citizens that we are being outstanding stewards of the resources they entrust to us? So let's get started. I'll talk about some strategic priorities. We'll go through the recommended operating budget. We'll spend some time on the assessed values and the recommended property tax rate, and then we'll talk about the capital budget. Again, we have many budget work sessions scheduled so we can go deeper into all these different areas. I also wanted to say this year we're doing a little different. In prior years, we always did the capital budget and the tax rate first, and then the operating budget. You get it all at one time. So this is a real budget. What's the right word? There you go, bonanza. You get the full bonanza here. All righty. So you've heard me mention before that I'm really proud of the organization as we worked our way through the pandemic. And you've heard me say that when we went into the pandemic, it's not that long ago, think about March of 2020. And we were in fiscal year 20, and we asked businesses to close. Think about that. Schools shut down. And we didn't know really what was in store for our citizens, our residents. Conventions stopped being held. So you remember that time. And we didn't know what the financial outlook for the city was going to be. But most of our employees had to come to work each and every day, whether it was police, fire, the water department, TPW. And so I'm really proud of the way the organization worked its way through COVID and the pandemic, and really without a playbook, right? I think we just had thousands of well-intended employees doing the right thing, and I think that's how you get through a pandemic. We were very conservative during the pandemic when we thought about how we were spending money and how we were projecting revenues. And if you remember, we had a hiring freeze for a period of time during that pandemic. And we weren't allowing departments to hire folks. We put capital projects on hold to make sure we knew where all the cash was that the city was spending on capital projects. And now we've worked our way through the pandemic, and I'll tell you, we are financially very strong. And our conservative approaches during that pandemic, I think, have positioned us very well as we come, if you want to say, coming out of the pandemic. And I'll get into some of those numbers as we go. One of the themes of the budget is a safe and clean community. So you'll hear about how we are recommending resources toward safety. In some ways, that means public safety and police and fire. In some areas, it means the safety of employees. In some areas, it means safety for pedestrians and safety for vehicular movement. So we're going to spend some time about safety, and it's used in a broad way. We're also going to talk about making sure that we are doing our best to keep the community clean. And I think safety and cleanliness are related, and you'll hear more about that. I've told some people the story of, it was last October, I spent some time in a city in the Northwest, and they were just opening up from COVID. So this was one of the first conventions. I said city in the Northwest, right? Okay, Portland. And they were just coming out of the pandemic. It was one of the first conventions they had at the convention center. And I thought the city was awful from a cleanliness standpoint and from a safety standpoint. They were telling the visitors to that convention where to go, where not to go for your own safety. And I'm just saying, it looked like the picture on the left. It felt like they'd let the city go. And they had folks in Portland that were apologizing for their city. And I thought, what a horrible thing that citizens of a community were not proud of their city. Right? And so it caused me to think about, I want to make sure that I'm proud of the city, which I am. I want you to be proud of the city. I want our employees to be proud of the city. And most importantly, I want our citizens and our residents to be proud of the city. And I think part of that starts with making sure we have a safe and clean community. Also want to take this opportunity to thank the voters of Fort Worth for approving the bonds that we had just this recent May. A lot of work goes into preparing for a bond program. It is now our responsibility to implement all those projects that were approved by the voters. All those projects are needed for the city that is growing by about 20,000 people a year. Now is Roger in here? There he is. Don't make eye contact with him. But next week, I'm gonna ask him to start on the 2026 bond program, right? And so when you think about a growing city like we are growing, we not only have to implement the program for 22, we're still implementing some of the projects from 2018, but it's also time to think about the next bond program as well, and it will be here before we know it. These next couple slides is really a reminder in some ways that we're no different than other businesses in the current times. Think about other businesses and what you've heard about them being able to recruit and retain a top-notch workforce. Well, we're in the same situation. We've got to do all we can to recruit and retain the best employees. And you'll hear about things in the budget. We've got money in there for pay for performance. We have money in the budget for making sure that our pay is competitive in the different marketplaces that we compete. There's money in there to deal with health insurance. And importantly is also that fifth year phase of the strategy for the pension. So as an employer, we're putting in more money for the pension, and we'll be asking employees to participate in that as well. But recruitment and retention, a very important part of the overall budget. And we're also impacted by the cost of living. Fuel prices impact the city just like they do other households. Inflation, interest rates, we're all going to be impacted by that. But I also want to use this slide. One of the other factors that we are very conscious about is the cost of the city on our citizens and our residents. And it's not just through the property tax rate, it's through our water rates or our stormwater rates or the cost to pick up garbage. And we're also going to talk about the environmental fee, but we're very conscious of the affordability for our residents and our businesses here in the city. This just a reminder, again, that a lot of the decisions we make, it's not just about today, but it's about future generations. This is talking about the growth that's coming. It also mentions open space as well, and that to me is a program about, are we doing the right things today to make this place great for the next generation and not just for us as we're here right now. Public engagement. Renee will get up after I'm finished and talk about additional community engagement. This is more to talk about kind of up to this point in time. There are a lot of inputs, a lot of feedback that goes into the budget. We had a biannual community survey that you are aware of. We had the Steer the Budget campaign. We had numerous bond program meetings that were just in April and May that people gave us feedback, not just on the bond program, but about everything else we do as well. We have budget stakeholder meetings. We have, as you know, a number of boards and commissions. We get feedback at neighborhood meetings, you name it. We're gonna also, and again, Renee will get up here when I'm finished to talk about the additional community engagement we'll do over the next 6 weeks related to the budget. Again, you'll hear a lot about safe and clean community, infrastructure, stewardship, supporting growth, the workforce recruitment and retention, and then this is like, what's this called, foreshadowing, that we're gonna recommend reducing the property tax rate, and more on that in a minute. So let's jump into the operating budget. The city spends roughly $2.4 billion, 2.324, in all the operation that the city's involved in. The general fund there is on the top, and we will spend a lot of time talking about the general fund for all the right reasons. That's where the property tax rate gets spent. That's where the sales tax majority is. That's police, fire, parks and rec, libraries, parks and recreation, and so forth. So a lot of attention will be put on the general fund. We also have enterprise funds that would include water and stormwater, just to name a couple. We have special revenue funds that includes crime control and prevention district for one. It will also include the environmental fund that we'll talk about. We have internal service funds that are more of an internal operation that includes like the fleet operation. And this year is our, information technology services will be added as an internal service fund. We also have debt service funds. But overall, we're spending $2.3 billion in all different kinds of resources, whether it's water revenue, stormwater revenue, garbage collection rates, as well as property tax and sales tax. This is just another way of showing it in a pie chart. And again, we're going to start with the general fund. This will show you the revenue streams for the general fund, and the general fund for fiscal year 23 is recommended at $915.3 million. Property tax is very strong, and I'll go into assessed values in a second. Sales tax has been incredibly strong. This is one area where we were conservative on our estimates during COVID, and the revenue is coming in a lot stronger than we anticipated at one time. Property tax makes up 58% of the total pie. And when you add in sales tax, that's what, 81% of all the money is in those two sources of revenue. Let's talk about assessed values and the tax rate. We've used this chart in the past. The top line is total assessed value, right? This is all properties in Tarrant, our part of Denton, our part of Wise, our part of Parker, and our part of Johnson County. So it's a composite of a number of counties. The orange line, which is the middle line, is what is taxable, right? So this is what's called the net adjustable taxable value. So that's the number we use to generate the property tax revenue that the city anticipates bringing in. Very strong growth over fiscal year 22. The green line is then the property tax revenue line that is a product of the assessed value, the orange line, and a product of the property tax rate. Does that make sense? So we're anticipating that we'll bring in 664 with the recommended property tax rate. If you break down the growth in assessed values, this will show you that the largest change came in existing values. This is not new development. So the biggest increase, nearly $10 billion, is from growth in existing values. The $2.7 billion that you see there, that's the new development number. All right? So it's a combination of two pieces. One's new development, stuff that didn't exist last year that's now on the books, and then the growth in values in all the other properties in Fort Worth. So our net taxable number is right now at $100 billion. The budget includes reducing the tax rate by 2 cents. All right? Shown a different way, the values are going up 14.5%, the tax rate's coming down 2 cents. The property tax revenue is still growing by that 11.4% amount, right? So the tax rate brings that down a little bit, but the revenue is still growing at 11.4%. This is how we allocate the current tax rate. So this is the current year, fiscal year 22. It's 73.25 going to 71.25, and we're going to change how it's allocated. Right? There's a couple slides on that. The recommended tax rate allocations go from the overall goes from 73.25 to 71.25. Debt, we're recommending staying the same. Pay-as-you-go is increasing from 6.5 cents to 7 cents. So the entire reduction of the tax rate is coming off of operations. So 2.5 cent reduction on the operation tax rate, 0.5 cent increase on the pay-as-you-go. Debt stays the same. I just said that. And then this is the revenue growth proportions for operations, for the pay-as-you-go part of capital maintenance, and for the debt service side. Shifting now to expenditures in the general fund. I'm not going to go through all these. We'll have time to, in the budget work sessions, to talk about. I'm going to hit the increases at a high level. Staying in those areas of safe, clean city, talking about supporting growth and maintaining infrastructure. Here we go. If you take the police and fire department, that's over half of the spending in all the general fund. We also break out transportation, public works, park and rec, economic development. Those would be the top five, and then everything else is in the other category. So what's in the recommended budget? One, well, again, we'll talk about reducing the property tax rate 2 cents. And I'm going to go through these categories. When you think about safety, I know first thing that comes to mind is police. Police, when you think about the budget, it's in the general fund, and it's crime control and prevention district. We'll spend time in a minute on crime control and prevention district, but there's more resources in there for patrol, investigators for crimes against children, homicide investigators, 911 communications, HOPE team, crisis intervention, and neighborhood police officers. As talked about earlier in the year, the budget expands the crossing guard program and includes middle schools. We're adding a second engine company in far north Fort Worth, the fire department's component of the HOPE team, and there's also positions in there for safety equipment and taking care of that. There are network improvements in TBW. I'll go more into street lights and pavement markings. But there's code officers as well for multifamily registration and inspections. And when we talk about the environmental fund, we'll be talking about more resources for making the city clean. There's positions in development services. I think I told DJ he got everything. Didn't I tell you that, DJ? And all that is to facilitate the development process. We're also moving more staff under DJ's direct supervision as well. So you'll see some transfers from other funds, mainly water, stormwater to be another one, that will be moved into development services, and then adding development services positions as well. In addressing some of the prior bond programs, we'll be opening the Southwest Library sometime in fiscal year 23, and the Northwest Community Center, right? And Parks and Recreation will open in the upcoming year as well, and those resources are included in the budget. We're going to increase, as I mentioned, the tax rate for pay-as-you-go from 6.5 to 7 cents. That entire additional half cent is going to two things: street lights and pavement markings. So we can tell you the money that's tied to the pay-as-you-go is going to put us on a 3-4 year cycle for all pavement markings. I'm looking at William over here, he's nodding. And street lights are going to be fixed in 30 days. When you call them in, and they're going to be fixed in 30 days, right? All right. Oh, we meant to say that. We're going to say it again, too, toward the end. And there's, again, the other pay-as-you-go increases, since we kept pay-as-you-go. When you think about it, not only did it stay the same, but it increased. means we captured all the assessed value increase for pay-as-you-go. And so the money there is for park maintenance, road maintenance, those other things that have been traditionally paid for out of the pay-as-you-go fund, and that also includes the neighborhood improvement program. The water fund will also continues the replacement of cast iron pipe. That's on a fast schedule as well. Now I'm shifting into other funds. And we'll talk about enterprise funds, special revenue funds, primarily. I think that's what I'm going to do in the next few slides. Enterprise funds. Excuse me. We have a number of those, including water and sewer, municipal airports, municipal parking, solid waste fund, and the stormwater utility. The water and sewer fund. What's that first bullet say? No retail rate increases. So being conscious again in our impact on the affordability question of folks in Fort Worth, there are no rate increases in the water fund. There are areas, though, in the water fund that have some of the highest inflationary increases. I remember Chris telling our group, like the cost of chemicals to treat water is something like 180% increases year over year. And so he's managing the water operation in a way that allows us to go to the citizens in the upcoming year without a retail rate increase. Solid waste fund. There are no recommended increases in the solid waste fund. There's one caveat of that, is that we're recommending that we shift some of the costs that are in the solid waste fund to the environmental fund. Keep that thought there. If you'll remember from prior conversations, the solid waste fund is almost entirely funded out of residential fees. Yet we have some programs in the solid waste fund that I think need to be paid by customers, and I think there needs to be a broader base. More on that when we talk about the environmental fund. The shift in those costs from the solid waste fund to the environmental fund also put the solid waste fund on a path to sustainability. If you remember from prior conversations, we were talking about needing perhaps residential fee increases to make it sustainable. Stormwater utility, no fee increases in the stormwater fund. Continued implementation of the capital program, as Jennifer so ably did a week ago, shared with you. And I think we also talked about the partnership with Parks and Recreation on the drainage and erosion study. Municipal parking is returning to a pre-pandemic level. The parking fund was impacted when people didn't come to work, and the parking fund was impacted when people didn't go to conventions. The general debt service fund last year made the debt service payment for the municipal parking fund. You might remember that. This puts the parking fund back on track where it can make all its obligations with the revenues that it brings in. Aviation Department. Roger's managing 3 general aviation airports. Special revenue funds. We'll talk primarily about crime control prevention, culture and tourism, and the environmental protection. I think we even have a slide here on golf, right? So crime control and prevention district, again, mostly sales tax revenue. You've seen some of these numbers already. Healthy increase in the sales tax revenue. We're expanding the crossing guard program as previously mentioned. And then again, there's positions in there for the HOPE team, neighborhood policing, crisis intervention. There's also the program at the Chisholm Trail Community Center. And as we've talked about before, the dollars are increased for partners with a shared mission as well. Culture and tourism, those revenues are getting back to a pre-COVID amount. There's still a lot of work to do since we lost some ground on the culture and tourism revenues. So we've used, as everybody knows, ARPA money to kickstart the convention center expansion, and there'll be more discussion about the phase 1, phase 2 expansion of the convention center in upcoming meetings. The Environmental Protection Fund. We've had the Environmental Protection Fund since 1996. And what the recommended budget includes is this focus on doing a better job in keeping our city clean. So we've been asking folks just randomly, have you seen a street sweeper in Fort Worth? Right? Just one question. And if people say yes, then we say, do you know how many street sweepers the city of Fort Worth has? And the answer is 2. That is just an example of how we think we can make the city cleaner. So part of the recommended fee increase is to handle the transition of costs from the solid waste fund. But the other part of the environmental fee increase is to do a better job cleaning the city, which means more litter crews, more street sweepers. And so we're recommending going from 2 to 12. We're going to increase the number of crews that do illegal dumping response. And so the fee for a resident, the fee is currently, I know you're wondering, the fee is currently 50 cents a month. The recommendation is that fee for a resident will go to $1.50 a month. So 50 cents to $1.50. Same corresponding increases if you're a commercial property. Same corresponding increase if you're an industrial property. We know there'll be more conversation on the environmental fund as we move forward in the budget work session, in the work sessions, but we think this is an opportunity for the city to do a better job keeping us clean. Municipal Golf. Richard made me use this one. All right, the good news is golf is moving in the right direction, meaning we have a plan to remove it from being subsidized by the general fund. And so in a number of years, the golf subsidy that currently exists will go away. I said that publicly too, Ms. Bivens. So. All right, internal service funds, we have a number of them, the largest being the group health fund. Then information technology, risk, capital projects, and the fleet operation make up all the internal service funds for the city. Just as a recap, all the different funds in summary, again, going from just under 2.1 billion to 3 billion. This is what is happening with the number of authorized positions. The general fund and CCPD, police is growing by about 100 positions. Fire, if I got the numbers right, are growing by about 23. And I want to say development services is about 39 of the total. So there are 4 departments that make up most of those increases that you see on that page. In the special revenue fund, the largest increase will be the increase in the environmental fund and the number of positions there. Shifting to the capital improvement program, we talk about capital financing in a number of different ways and using the combination of cash and debt. And so we want to maintain the infrastructure primarily using cash. And when we talk about new infrastructure, then we can talk about other revenue streams, including impact fees and debt. You've seen this slide before. I want to spend a little time here. Because when you set a goal, sometimes it takes many years to get there. And when you think about bond programs and maintaining infrastructure, that happens over a number of years. So in this slide, what we're trying to show is we have bond programs every 4 years. That's why we're starting to think about 2026. And we talk about what we need to do with the tax rate. And Ms. Bivens, Mayor, Councilmember Flores, you may remember some of these conversations about how are we going to dedicate more money for capital in both debt service and in cash so we can maintain the infrastructure that we're doing. And so when you look at the bottom two rows, the goal essentially was to try to get to about a third of the tax rate, right? For a growing city, a third of our tax rate should be for capital, whether it's debt or cash. And we're getting close to that 33%, right? We're now over 30%. And we started back at 21% back in 2014. And then we've made pay-as-you-go, the cash part of that, which should also be, I'd argue, a third of the amount that we spend in capital. A third of that should be cash. And again, we're almost at a third of that right there. But it takes time to do it, and I think discipline over many, many years, which I appreciate that from the mayor and city council, that we're in a much better place now in planning for infrastructure and then maintaining the infrastructure that we're building. So capital projects that are underway, we got the future city hall and the new council chamber. I think there's a presentation at your next meeting on that. We have Fire Station 45, Fire Station 26, which is a replacement. We also have the fire station relocations that were part of the bond program. We have the South Patrol Division headquarters, Southwest Library, and the Diamond Hill and Northwest Community Centers all underway. For the goals for the capital side, it's to, again, continue implementing the 18 program, start the 22 program, and then look at what we need to do both related to the maintaining the infrastructure that we're building. I mentioned that the pay-as-you-go includes the neighborhood improvement strategy, and then we're trying to tie it into the comprehensive plan as well. The CIP is done by different funds. I think you've seen this slide before. There'll be a capital plan for the general program, aviation, public events, stormwater, and water. When you look at the capital plan, we do it over multiple years. Those are all the funds together. This is capital, so it's not the operating side. And when you look at what we're spending a year on infrastructure, just think about every year we're spending between $200 and $300 million just in the water fund, right? So when you think about an infrastructure heavy operation, that would be water. And when you look at it overall, we're spending anywhere roughly $500 million to $876 million a year when you include all the funds in capital. Every council member will get a document that will list out the projects by fiscal year. This is just looking at the general CIP in the different categories. This is the pay-as-you-go portion. Again, growing from just under 53 million a year to over 65 million. Most of the increase you see is going into TPW, and that half cent, again, that is increasing from the tax rate is going to street lights and pavement markings. Don't feel sorry for Richard. When you look at that park and rec number, we have shifted the mowing money that used to be in the pay-as-you-go into his general fund operating budget. Richard is responsible for all the mowing in the city, right? And we gave him additional money. And he's now also responsible for all the alleyway maintenance in the city. And he was given all the money for that too. So if you have any issues with mowing or alleyway maintenance, that's Richard. All right. This just showing the distribution of pay-as-you-go in a pie chart. I think I might have said this a few times. There it is again for transportation. It's even in writing, Councilmember Bivens, look at that. 3-year replacement cycle reduces response times to 30 days for pavement markings. Increases the total crews for street lights, reduces response time to 30 days. And then there's money for that other stuff. The other pay-as-you-go that we talk about is for property management. Steve is responsible for all the other buildings that the city owns. So that goes for roofs, HVACs, so forth. We have the neighborhood improvement strategy. We've got technology infrastructure and then park infrastructure as well. So tying some of this back up, we have focused primarily on this budget on making sure that we are safe and the resource allocation that we have in the recommended budget, that we're doing what we can to be good stewards of the infrastructure. We're addressing the growth challenges and have added resources appropriately. And we are also focused on recruiting and retaining the best employees. And included in that is also a property tax rate reduction as part of the recommended budget. But there's more. We have work sessions scheduled for the 10th, 12th, 25th, 26th, and on September 8th and 9th. There's public hearings on the budget and the tax rate. And we're scheduled to approve the budget and the tax rate and the CIP on September 27th. Next, I'm going to ask Renee Tejas to come up here and talk about, where'd he go? Talk about the additional things we're doing on community engagement. But before he comes up there, I know we're going to spend a lot of time going into details on the budget, but if there are any questions that folks have right now, we're good. We'll go right to Renee. How about that? As soon as we find him. While we're still looking for him, I do want to thank the folks in the room. I get to stand up here and give you the summary of the work that hours and hours and hours goes into. And it starts in the departments that have to generate the different budget requests that come forward. And then it goes to planning and data analytics. Then it comes to the management team. So I want to thank all those people that are involved in this process. Oops, excuse me.
Sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I'm coming back to the thank yous in a minute.
I'm sorry, sir.
Let me go over here. I'll step this way. So I just want to take the time to thank all those folks that get involved in the budget process throughout the year that gets us to this point. And I know there's going to be more work as we also get through the next 6-7 weeks together. So thank you, everybody. Renee, community engagement.
Did I shrink? I didn't feel like the podium was this big last time. Mayor Parker, Mayor Pro Tem, honorable council members. We're going to talk about communication and engagement, one of the biggest focuses in my month and a half, 2 months since I've been here, particularly on the budget. And you heard the vision from David, and so how did we take that particular vision and turn it into a strategy that we could work with in communication and engagement? And so what we wanted to do is make it digestible and in the themes that David hit on. And so the infrastructure and the growth, the affordability, the clean and safe space is all kind of rolled into some icons that you'll consistently see throughout the communication and engagement process. And of course, we listen throughout the year. As David mentioned, we have the HOA and neighborhood association meetings. Council, you are no stranger to those. Our engagement team is no stranger to those. Our leadership teams attends many of those. We listen on the Fort Worth app and in the call center data, which tells us that last year in 2021, they took 6,884 calls regarding street light outs non-emergency. And the 9th biggest call-in was in relation to high grass on private property. The calls of the center, the project meetings and budget presentations, as we listen to our department directors as well. Really, there is no one better when it comes to community surveys than ETC. They are the national standard, and they, in collaboration with us, produce a report, and through that, we listen to our residents. Of course, there's the strategic vision of the council and their retreat. We hear from you most weeks throughout the year, as does the public, and the executive team has an open ear to what it is you're saying. And in addition to all of this year-long feedback, it's not lost on me that we need dedicated and identified communication and engagement budget time for people to realize that they are specifically going to be able to engage and let us know their thoughts on the budget. So we kind of greased the wheels with the Steer the Budget campaign with Molly. We heard from homeless camps. We heard about homeless camps, streets. More than half of the information we received through that initiative concerns street and infrastructure maintenance. And the full analytics are online, but Facebook far exceeded the ways we received feedback through that campaign. And then getting into the budget meetings, what's important to me to bring to the table as we looked to organize these is that they be accessible. You'll see flyers that announce the locations with bus stop locations for individuals who don't have their own transportation, that they're understandable. Many of the meetings that we're going to be having will be translated in real time, and also in the way we are communicating things so that it's digestible and understandable for our audiences. And those that don't have the opportunity or chance to attend an evening meeting because they have 2 jobs, they have families, they have a night job, that there are still opportunities for them to be able to engage. And so we're going to have meetings in different types of formats throughout the city, geographically dispersed with question and answer times. We're going to have digital engagement where not only will some of these meetings be recorded and people will be able to watch them and offer their input, we'll have a thought exchange where people can give their comments and or concerns about the present budget. Also, they can comment directly on the 2023 web budget page. We're adding a link on the My Fort Worth app. This is new, an idea we got from an actual council aide. The call center will be taking input on the call center at 817-392-1234, where people can call and say they'd like to give comment in English or Spanish, and that will be marked and compiled into a report we'll provide our decision makers, as well as just a general email for communicating anything that folks would like at Fort Worth Connection, FW Connection, actually, FW Connection at fortworthtexas.gov. And as we look to these meetings that we're going to be holding, please note that in the IR last week, we had a date that had the 18th for the Summer Glen meeting, but in order for Councilmember Blaylock to be able to attend a important community forum on crime prevention that the city is having, that date was adjusted, and we have solidified the Boswell High School date as of this morning. So it's all been a moving target, but I thank each of you for your work in helping select locations, work with us on your calendar times, and when those meetings will take place, all of them at 6 o'clock. And as I mentioned, we'll be getting the decision makers a wrap-up piece from all of the engagement that we hear of and record so that you can make the best determinations. But oftentimes, residents, and justly so, want to speak directly to council. So we will include in our messaging all of the dates that they can do so. And then taking a look at holistically at all of our platforms, we'll be putting out the messaging with our partner organizations on social media in all the ways that we know how to do so. And as we took a look at how to kind of manage this large communication initiative, and in the battle for attention spans, we really wanted to be able to break down things about the budget as best that we could, give folks the top line information if they only had a limited amount of time, but then go into the specific story. So we'll be explaining components of the budget as well as very specific examples about what's in the budget and how it benefits our taxpayers in Fort Worth, and giving those examples. But the way that we're able to do this and produce, we'll be producing many of these types of examples, is we took kind of the example for the Emergency Operations Center, when you pull folks in from different departments and your messaging is on and it's good and you're getting it out quick and rapid as things come in. And so we've created what we call the EOC JIC, or Joint Information Center, up on the 3rd floor, and we have asked the cooperation of departments to help us out with PIOs that may be able to do so. And so we have Sandy Baker from Water, Kevin Neal from Communication and Public Engagement, Todd Overman from the library, lots of folks to thank, Valerie, Karen, Sharon at the call center, as we do this, and created quite a synergy and energy up on the 3rd floor as things develop in real time. And so please be looking for this type of information to be put out about what's in the budget and how it benefits the residents of Fort Worth.
Thank you, Renee. Great job. Any questions for Renee, council? No. Go ahead, Carlos.
Renee, and as far as the format for the actual meetings, is it going to be very similar to prior budget public meetings, where you have different tables, stations, specific departments that can, elaborate on whatever, line items there are for specific budgetary items?
So we're going to have a mix in the format of budgets, and so they're going to be city budget meetings as well as community conversations, and that's the mix of the meetings that we're having among the 9 meetings across town. Some of them will have the department heads that will be coming, and we've been working with those department heads to have poster boards of what it is they're most excited about within the proposed budget, and have what's called the roundabout in the gallery, where they can talk and interact, and then come and get the presentation and a Q&A at the end. Others are going to have the community circle, where it's kind of more intimate feeling with the city manager and some top leadership, and they'll get the same informative presentation and sit kind of circular style and be able to communicate with the leadership, and if the council member from that particular area is there as well, their concerns in a kind of pass the mic format.
All right, thank you.
No other questions? Okay, thanks, Renee. I think we're turning it back over to David.
Okay, if anybody had been looking at the agenda, then you noticed that I skipped the informal reports. So I think we have copies of the informal reports. I just want to spend a brief minute on that. They're also in your Dropbox. But these are, that's right. That's why we brought hard copies too. These are legal requirements as part of the budget process. So the first informal report is an overview of the legal requirements the city must comply with during the fiscal year 23 budget and associated ad valorem tax rate adoption process, property tax rate. And there's state law requirements and there's city charter requirements, and that's spelled out in the first informal report. The second informal report goes into what is required in the truth in taxation, and it describes the calculations for the no new revenue tax rate and the voter approval tax rate for fiscal year 23. And as I mentioned, this is a requirement under the truth in taxation in the Texas Constitution and Texas Tax Code. And normally we give these informal reports as part of the budget presentation in prior years. We'll be going into detail on the property tax rate and assessed value tomorrow, so I will be walking through some of the conversation about no new revenue, conversation about the voter approved tax rate, and you'll see language in there about unused increment of tax rate availability. The final informal report, I believe, is also required under the truth in taxation, and it's the submission of the 2022 certified appraisal roll from the different counties. And again, we operate in Tarrant County, Denton County, Wise County, Parker County, and we have property in Johnson County, but it's not taxable. But those certified rolls from each of those counties are included in this information. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions, or certainly tomorrow we can go into detail on a number of those.
Go ahead, Gina.
I don't have, well, I guess I do have one question. But David, I just want to say hats off to you when it comes to street pavings, markers, street lights, all that stuff. It has taken too many years to get to this point. But for you to put your name on the line and say within 30 days, we're going to have street lights repaired, that lets me know that you plan on making this happen. I commend you for that. I am most appreciative. I do think we need to see about adding a Saturday budget day meeting, because not everybody can go to work, get off work, and come 2 hours and come listen to us. And so that's just my opinion.
Okay.
But the idea about what we're doing with street lights, pavings, markers, I'm real impressed.
On that point, David, I'd want to offer, I guess, comment and maybe some advice. I'm sure a lot in TPW will remember me bringing this up. When it comes to pavement markings, even if TPW is diligent and does its markings as best they can and try to keep up with it, there's some heavily trafficked areas that the markings do not last. So, you know, I may not have the complete picture, but based on what I know, you have water-based paints, you have solvent-based paints, you have thermoplastics. Thermoplastics, I don't know what the price point is, last longer, they need heat to be applied. I would assume that they're more durable. So just a suggestion, if we can use more of the durable type, which would be solvent and thermoplastic, especially in the higher trafficked areas, maybe rely more so on the thermoplastic. And I'd like to see that.
Thanks, Carlos. Anybody else? No? Thank you, David. Great job today. First of many meetings, right?
First of many.
That's the last item?
That's it.
Okay. Well, looks like we're adjourned.
Till 6.
Adjourned till 6, of course. What's that? I know, right? Meeting adjourned.